Today we're going to cover addition. So a couple of things, we've been doing this several times now, but I just want to remind you that we're really focusing on building a conceptual understanding. Nothing in this lesson is outside of things you've already seen, but we want you to understand this conceptually so that you can help other people with it. Again, today's material will probably seem easy, but what I'm looking for is more of a conceptual level of understanding and for you to be able to explain the processes that you're used to using. So we're going to cover something that is, again, a basic property of the number system, addition, and we're going to dig into it. So addition really can be thought of as actually occurring on the number line. If we consider, for example, the numbers 3 and 2, and we wanted to add 3 to 2, we can look at this as occurring on the number line. So what is the step that needs to take place? Well, the first thing we do is we put a mark at the number 3, and then we actually count over 2 units. So you can see here in the red that I've counted over 2 units. So we've got 1 unit and 2 units. This allows us to say that 3 plus 2 is 5. Okay, so this is something that's very standard, very easy to make sense of. What we're looking for is saying 3 and 2 together give us 5. So that's basic addition, and that's the basic principle of addition. So how do we apply that into bigger cases? Well, before we can even start looking at other numbers, we need to think about some of the properties of addition. So if you think about this number 0 represents nothing. So if I want to take any number and I want to add 0 to that number, so let's say 3, and I move over 0 units, I'm still left with 3. Similarly, if I wanted to take the number 0 and add 3 to that, I'm left at the number 3. So this gives us this property of addition, specifically that any number plus 0 is that number, and 0 plus any number is that number. So just to reiterate this, if I take any number and I add 0, I get that number. If I take 0 and add any number, I get that number. Another property of addition that we can think of in terms of the number line is what's called the commutative property of addition. So let's look at this in terms of the number line. Let's say that I start with the number 2, and I add to that number 3. So there's 1, 2, 3. I wind up at 5. However, if I start with the number 3 and add to that number 2, I again end up at the number 5. So this is the commutative property of addition. This says that changing the order of addition does not change the result. So a plus b is the same as b plus a. So let's go ahead and employ this now on larger numbers. You don't really want to use the number line all the time. Really, ideally, you're using the number line anytime you've got numbers between 0 and 9. And beyond that, we're going to go ahead and use our units for adding. So let's do a simple example. Let's look at the numbers 44 and 52, and let's ask what is 44 plus 52. So what we first want to do is we want to line these up in terms of our units. So 44 and 52. And we've got these lined up, so I've got my ones place. So right here, I've got the ones place. And over here, I've got my tens place. So then to add these numbers, I'm just going to add in place. So 4 plus 2 on our number line, 4 plus 2, if I start at the number 4, and I move over 2 units, I get 6. So 4 plus 2 is 6. 4 plus 5. So if I start at the number 4, more numbers here, I move over 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 4 plus 5 is 9. Okay, we're going to stop using the number line here at this point. You understand the basic idea of it, but we don't need to be using it all the time. So let's go to something that's just a little bit more difficult. 331 and 225. So here we've got tens place and we've got a hundreds place in addition to our ones place that we've been working with all along. So I'm going to again just write it as 331 and 225. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add down in columns. So 1 plus 5 is 6. 3 plus 2 is 5. 3 plus 2 is 5. So my answer is 556. Okay, so what if I've got something like 537 and 48? Now I've got in one side a hundreds column, a tens column, and a ones column. But over here I've only got a tens column and a ones column. Well, I can actually think of this as being 0, 100. So I can write 537, just like we've been doing, 0 100s, 4 tens, 8 ones. Okay, this also gets a little bit more complicated here because 7 plus 8 is actually 15. That means that 7 plus 8 gives me 110 and 5 ones. So just to reiterate that, 7 plus 8 gives me 15. So I have 110 and 5 ones. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to keep track of my ones in my ones column. And then I'm going to put another 1 up here in the tens column. Here I'm going to say 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 4 is 8. And then 5 plus 0 is 5. So my answer is 585. We should also just really quickly reiterate, what do we do when we've got a long sum? We can add more than one number at a time. Well, what we can do is we can just stack them all like we've been doing. So I keep track of all of my columns. I've got 0 tens over here with the 6. I've got 0 tens with the 5, and I've got 0 tens with the 2. So I'm just going to add up down the column. So I've got 2 plus 6 is 8, plus 5 is 13, plus 2 is 15. I had an extra 1 show up. So now I've got 1 plus 1 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 2. So there's nothing real complicated about addition. The final property that we should mention is the associative property. Specifically, regrouping numbers can happen in any sort of ordering that you want it to do. So what this property really means is to make your life easy if you can make it easy. Group things in ways that make things easy. So naturally, we tend to work in terms of tens. Tens are really easy because we have 10 fingers. And so if I were to say 7 plus 3 plus 5 equals, one of the more natural things to do is to think of this as being 7 plus 3 plus 5. And so this is 7 plus 3 is 10 plus 5, and this is equal to 15. And it's just a fairly natural way to do it. But if you wanted, you could also do 7 plus 3 plus 5 is equal to 7 plus 3 plus 5, which is equal to 7 plus 8, which is equal to 15. So what the associative property says is that you can group however is easiest for you. And that's the whole idea behind the associative property. So this is the basics of addition. You've got homework problems that are based on this and just work through those. There's nothing real difficult about addition.